When I started training calisthenics and bodyweight training almost 15 years ago, I made a lot of mistakes. And the purpose of this video is to prevent that from happening to you. So you can consider this video more or less a complete guide to how to get started with calisthenics and bodyweight training. I will introduce to you the best compound calisthenics exercises you can use to build strength and muscle. I will also show you the skill training you should include in your training. I will show you what equipment you should consider, but also ways to train without equipment. And if you stay to the very end of this video, I'll show you how you can put all of this together to your own personal training plan so you can get started right now. Now, the first things I want to introduce is the compound basics. These are the exercises I consider to 1. Target all the major muscle groups. 2. Is easy to progress in a stepwise manner to ensure progress. 3. Gives a huge amount of carryover to other strength elements and skills. 4. Builds muscle efficiently. And 5. Require minimum equipment. The first exercise is the push-up, a calisthenics classic. Now, the push-up hits your pec, your front deltoids, your triceps, even your core. It's a great exercise to build strength. Now, the push-up can be made super easy by elevating your hands on an elevated surface or on rings, and the lower you go, the harder it gets, until you can do a full push-up. Now, I won't include a bunch of super complicated form cues for this, but try to remember to go all the way down with your chest on every repetition. Try to push out your shoulders to create distance between your chest and the floor in the top position, and try to avoid arching your back. Other than this, consider trying to progress from the easier variation to the more difficult variations. Now, when you can do the full push-up easily, it's time to move further. Now, you can develop the push-up in 2 different directions. You can start training towards the handstand push-up, or you can start training towards the one-arm push-up. So the road towards the handstand push-up will focus more on shoulder strength, while the road towards the one-arm push-up will focus more on chest. You could include both of them, although one of them would probably be enough. The way you move towards the handstand push-up is by starting with a pike push-up and elevating your feet more and more until you're able to do a pike push-up with your feet elevated to hip height against the wall. After building up a few of these, you should be strong enough to do a handstand push-up with wall assistance, which is perhaps my favorite exercise. For the one-arm push-up, you start by doing staggered push-up, by imagining that your nipple should touch the hand on the same side, and then alternating sides. As you get stronger, you go wider, and eventually you enter a stance where you are creating a triangle with your hand and your feet, doing finger-assisted one-arm push-ups. At this point, as you get stronger, you drop fingers until you're at 1 finger, and eventually can do the one-arm push-up. Now, the next exercise is dip. If you're already doing push-ups, it's not a must. However, it is a great exercise and will build a lot of strength both in your triceps and your chest. You can do this on gymnastics rings or parallel bars, or you can even get creative and use a couple of chairs or a kitchen corner even. The easiest way to learn the dip is by using rubber bands. You wrap your knees around the rubber band and do dips while simulating a lower body weight, basically. As you get stronger, you use a thinner band until you can eventually do dips without any bands. Alternatively, without rubber bands, you can use foot assistance as a way to progress your dip. And as you get stronger, you use your feet less and less until you can do the dip without using your feet. Now, this wouldn't be a good introduction to calisthenics and bodyweight training without mentioning the pull-up, which is perhaps the best exercise to build strength and muscle in your upper back, lats, and biceps. Now, to do pull-ups, you obviously need a pull-up bar or gymnastics rings. Worst case, you could switch out these with rows, which I will show in a moment, but I do recommend you find a place where you can do pull-up variations. As a last resort, you could introduce a door anchor to do various difficulties of the pull-up. The easiest way to make the pull-up easier is also to use exercise bands or rubber bands. So you start out with a rather thick resistance band, and then you use a thinner resistance band when you get stronger until you eventually can do the pull-ups without resistance bands. Alternatively, you can also use leg assistance in this exercise. There are various ways of doing this. Most important is that you can consistently use the same amount of help every time, and that you can progress by using less help as you get stronger. Once you master the pull-up, there are a ton of ways you can make this more challenging. You could move towards the muscle ups, or you could start working towards the one-arm pull-up. I have tutorials of both of these, so I won't go into the details, but getting a good 10 to 20 pull-ups is a good way to start. Now, I mentioned as an alternative to the pull-up, you could do bodyweight rows. These could also be performed on gymnastics rings, but last resort, you can use a table, a rather sturdy one, to make sure it won't fall over you. Regardless of how you're doing them, the way to progress is by starting with your hands higher. The higher your chests are compared to your knees, the easier it is. And the lower your chests are, until the point where your body is parallel to the ground, the harder it gets. If you straighten your knees, it will become slightly harder. And as these get easy, you want to start moving towards the one-arm row. Now, you can do this in the same way as we're working towards the one-arm push-up, starting out with staggered rows where you're pulling the nipple of the same arm up to your thumb and alternating sides. And then you can go wider, and then eventually you can start assisting with one finger for your one-arm rows until you're strong enough to do a one-arm row unassisted. Now, you could include both the pull-up and the row in your training program. The pull-up will be more lats and bicep intense, while the rows will target your upper back muscle to a bigger extent. But if you were to choose between these two, I would definitely go for the pull-up. Now, as you already probably noticed, there is one or two types of equipment that I would recommend looking into. One would be a pair of gym rings, which can be used for literally anything related to bodyweight strength. You wouldn't need anything else. With a pair of gym rings, you can adjust the height, you can adjust the difficulty of each skill, and you can perform pretty much anything you would ever need. The second piece of equipment would be rubber bands. Although you can manage without them, rubber bands is the most straightforward way of progressing in a stepwise and measurable manner, especially also when you start getting more advanced, working towards planches, front levers, and other skills, also like muscle ups. So it's not a must, but it's one of the few things I do recommend. Now, my brand Movement Made makes both of these in addition to another couple of basic calisthenics equipment. So be sure to check that out if you're on the lookout for good quality, travel-friendly and sustainable training equipment. The next compound bodyweight exercise is the squat. Most people think the bodyweight squat isn't scalable. However, learning the single leg squat will put your lower body strength to the test. As soon as you're comfortable with deep squats on two legs, gradually approaching the one leg squat is a great way to develop lower body strength. And when the single leg squat becomes easy, you can even use exercise bands to resist it to make it even harder. Just make sure to use a sturdy and durable set of exercise bands, like the natural rubber bands I developed for Movement Made. As an alternative, you could make the single leg squat explosive by making sure you control the negative phase and then jumping as high as you can on the concentric phase, generating as much power as you can. The single leg squat will become heavier the stronger you get in an auto-regulative manner. I would also recommend including some core training into your workouts. So a lot of people, it is important to, get visible and strong abs, but also in calisthenics and bodyweight training, getting a strong core is super important in order to stabilize your body in the different exercises. So I have 3 favorite core exercises that I want to show you. You don't need to use all of them, you can choose one of them or you can alternate between them. All of these are easy to progress in a stepwise manner and they provide super relevant core strength, specifically for calisthenics skills when going forward. The first one is the leg raise or the toes to bar. This can be made easier by starting with your knees up, then eventually straightening one leg, then straightening both legs, and so on, continuously making it harder until you can get the full leg raise. Next exercise is dragon flags. Now you can make the dragon flag easier also by doing them tucked and then extending your knees slightly. You can do them one leg in a straddle position and eventually in the full position. Now if you don't have access to anything to hang from or to hold yourself onto, a very good alternative is walkouts or slide outs. Now the easiest way to do this in an efficient manner is to slide or walk out as far as you can every time. Do 5 to 10 repetitions. And then you don't really need to measure and ensure that you're progressing in a stepwise manner, because if you're always going as far as you can, this exercise will sort of be autoregulative. Now, what's important to remember with all of these exercises is to make sure you're making progress. So if you're just starting out, here are my recommendations. 1. Start with an exercise progression that you can do 5 to 10 repetitions of. This should be your maximum effort, or at least very close to it. 2. When doing this exercise, do as many as you can, or at least very close to. But as a beginner, you likely won't be able to go close to failure anyway. But I find it important to learn to know your body and your limits, especially when you at some point want to use more complex ways of programming your strength training. 3. For every new workout, try to either add more difficulty, more repetitions, or additional sets. Doing 3 to 5 sets is usually a good window for most people. 4. Once an exercise starts feeling easier, meaning you can do about 10 to 15 repetitions of it, you should consider moving to a harder variation or progression of that exercise. And 5. Stay consistent. Remember that a 30-minute workout where you're including 3 to 5 sets of 2 exercises is a hell of a lot better than nothing. And if you do this every day, you're already training more than enough to see great progress. As a beginner, optimally, you should aim for something like 6 of 10 sets per muscle group. Now in calisthenics, you obviously have all of these awesome skills that people want to learn, right? And doing these compound basics that we just talked about will have a lot of carryover to all of these skills. However, there are some skills that are so different in terms of the kind of strength you're developing by training them that you should consider starting with them actually straight away. I'm particularly referring to straight arm exercises such as front levers, planche, back levers, and so on. So to make sure you're not losing out on gains, I recommend you include exercises for this into your workouts. A great way to start is to have the front lever and the back lever as goals. These will develop all the straight arm strength you need in order to keep progressing this kind of strength towards skills such as the full planche or the full front lever, human flags, press to handstands, and other skills where you're using straight arms to exert force. If you don't include specific training for these skills, you won't see a lot of carryover from your basic training. A great exercise to introduce a little bit of both and to keep it within just one exercise is to combine the front lever and the back lever training with your core training. The goal with this exercise is to start from hanging and rotate all around to what is called a German hang, and doing these back and forth for repetitions. Now you can make them easier by using your feet to help out with the movement, or to tuck in your knees, and you can make it more difficult by starting in an L-sit to avoid any kind of momentum, or by slightly extending your knees. Alternatively, you can work towards a tuck front lever by using rubber bands, or the back lever in the same way. You could also approach a tuck planche. However, if you're already doing back lever training, it's not a necessity. You will see quite a lot of carryover from the back lever training. Now the tuck planche can also be approached using rubber bands, but you can also progress by using foot assistance, or simply by doing planche leans. From a push-up position, lean as far as you can and push back up. One skill that I believe everyone should include into their training is handstand training. I won't go into the details here. I have plenty of different tutorials for all the different levels out there already. I even have a bunch of programs for handstand training in my training app. But if you eventually want to develop skills like handstand push-up or impressive combinations where you're using handstands or handstands on the P-bars or whatever, getting started with your handstand training as soon as possible is highly recommended. It's also an awesome skill that's a lot of fun to work with. Another thing you might want to consider including into your training is mobility training. This can help you make some of the skills more easy, but it can also help you prevent injuries in the long term. Not to mention, it will make some of your skills look slightly cooler. One thing I want to mention is wrist mobility. Doing different kinds of wrist push-ups is a great idea. When doing calisthenics, we do a lot of skills with our hands on the ground. So making sure your wrists are strong will prevent injury further down the road. If there's one upper body mobility exercise I would recommend everyone to include, it's the back bridge. The easiest way is to start with your feet elevated and then work your ways down. I do have a separate tutorial for this already, which you can check out, but doing back bridges is highly recommended. Now you can also include lower body mobility in your training, but now we're suddenly starting to include so many different parts, right? So a way to make it slightly more efficient would be to do your lower body stretching in between the sets of your upper body strength training. It's a great way to make your workouts more efficient and to reap some additional gains flexibility-wise. So how would do you actually structure a workout plan from all of this? Well, it does depend on a lot of factors, like how much time do you have available? What's your need for recovery? Because this is actually a very individual thing. People recover at different rates. It depends on your stress, your diet, and your training volume, obviously. So in regards to recovery needs, the best thing you can do is actually to listen to your body. Looking at your performance is the best way to sort of measure your need for recovery as well. So if you're performing very well each workout, it likely means you have rested enough. If you keep feeling fatigued and your performance in terms of repetitions are worse than your previous workout, it means you probably needed a little bit more rest. So this is something that needs fine-tuning, and the only person that can fine-tune this is yourself, or if you have a coach that is with you at every workout every time. Now my recommendation is to choose 3 to 6 exercises that you do 3 to 5 sets, and you call it a workout. It's easy as that. Or to make everything fit into your schedule, you distribute the different exercises between the different days sort of as you please throughout the week, just making sure that you're actually getting in quite a few sets of each exercise. As an example, you could do 3 days a week where you're doing all of the 6 basic compound exercises, and that would be a great way to build strength and muscle. Now, if you also wanted to include the skill training because you have a goal of learning, the planche and the front lever and so on, I'd recommend either doing this as a separate workout or starting to split up your workouts. You could, for example, do 6 workouts a week followed by 1 whole rest day where you're doing 3 compound exercises and 1 skill exercise each time you work out. Or you could do 3 compound exercises followed by a day of skill training and then the remaining 3 compound exercises, and then repeat this and you have a 6 days a week workout plan. Now mobility training and handstand practice could be included as a separate workout, or you could sort of make it your warm-up to do 30 minutes of handstand and mobility training before you do your strength training. Both of these would give you progress. There are literally 100 ways to structure this, all of which will likely lead to similar progress as long as you ensure that the total volume is the same. And by total volume, I mean the total number of sets you're doing for the different exercises and for the different muscle groups. For example, making sure that you're getting 6 to 10 sets of the pull-up exercises and the push-up exercises within the week. And then also in a similar manner for the different exercises, depending on your goals. It's better to make it simple and consistent than to make it super complicated and inconsistent. Now, if you're interested in getting full structured training programs, you could check out my training app, Berg Movement. I have different training programs for different schedules, different splits and different goals, as well as different skills. And now I think it's adding up to something like 1,200 exercise progressions, so you can make sure that you're always moving forwards in your sort of progression ladder within the world of calisthenics and bodyweight strength. If you're struggling financially, you can apply for a scholarship or discounts. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.